So rationally and naturally, the human being is inclined towards monotheism, a tawheed, that God is the transcendent being, who is the Lord and the creator of all things, and that God is not like anything in this universe, and nothing in this universe is like God. We would therefore not accept the claim that God is a spirit. No, because a spirit is a created thing. God is not like any created thing, and therefore we don't claim that the essence of God, that of God, is like any created thing. That does not mean that God is devoid of attributes. No. God is the one who possesses attributes. And the attributes of God are the attributes of perfection. We ascribe to God all the qualities and the attributes of perfection. And that if we share any attribute with God, it is in name, not in reality. For example, God is the seeing, and God is the hearing, and God is the knowing. And you could also say, but I see and I hear and I know. Therefore, don't I share the attributes of God? We would say, it is in name, not in reality. Because God, for example, sees everything in every place, at every time, in every spectrum of seeing, and that vision does not confuse God in the least. Whereas my vision is entirely limited. In fact, if there's a stage where I put my fingers, I don't see them anymore. That's the limit of my vision. Similarly, God's hearing is absolute. God hears everything, every spectrum of sound. Even my daughter, interestingly enough, between me and my kids, there's a different spectrum of sound I just discovered, to my shock. That they've made not that I'm shocked by this, I think it's quite a good idea, they've made a certain gadget that sends off a sound that is only heard by people under 25 years old. And they're used to, scare away hoodies and stuff like that. So it's actually used. And my daughter played it on, she said, can you hear that? I said, what? She said, it's annoying, it's horrible. And I couldn't hear. She could hear it. But God can hear every spectrum of sound. Every sound in every place. If 10 of you, or 2 of you, or even 3 of you started to ask me a question at the same time, I would say, please, please, one at a time. Why do I say one at a time? Because I am limited, I'm human. I can only decipher one sound at one time. That is why, that's the limitation of my hearing. But God, as the Prophet Muhammad said, if the human of you and the jinn of you were to gather together in one place, and you were all to ask God for what you wished, then God, not only would God hear all of that, and that God could give you everything you wanted, and that would be easy for God. So the hearing of God is perfect. So the similarity between my hearing and God's hearing in reality is in name only. So God is the possessor of attributes, but they are the attributes of perfection. So we don't ascribe to the Creator the deficiencies of the creation. We do not describe to God the deficiencies of the Creator. This is an important part of a tawheed, Islamic monotheism. To ascribe to the Creator any of the deficiencies or the limitations of the creation is shirk. Or to ascribe to the creation any of the perfect attributes of God is shirk. This is how we distinguish completely the Creator from the creation. And this, on the very base level, is the most important thing a human being should ever achieve in their life, is that distinction between God and the creation. So to uphold a tawheed and to avoid the shirk is the task, and to explain that to the people is the task of every messenger. So that moves us on to the second aspect that I want to talk about, Risala. believe, has chosen from amongst the human beings people to convey a message from him. That message is a message of knowledge about God and also guidance through which and by which the human beings can live their life. So we believe that throughout the ages God has sent 124,000 prophets. So the prophets have not been limited only to the Bani Israel, to the children of Israel. No, that indeed in reality God has sent prophets to people in different times, in different nations. God has sent those prophets, and God has sent books, and God has sent guidance through those prophets. So this is the way that God has chosen to enlighten the human being, or to reveal to the human being knowledge about himself. Now, there are, of course, conceivably so many different ways that God might decide to give us knowledge about himself and to guide us throughout our lives. There are many different conceivable ways, and you know, maybe God could, I don't know, write a big load of instructions on a mountain somewhere or whatever. But we believe that the way that God has chosen to reveal this knowledge is through certain human beings. Now, it is important to understand, number one, that the prophets are human beings. They are human beings. And whilst I say this, I want to make an important I want to distinguish an important matter that is connected here with the monotheism. Muslims do not believe that human beings or the prophets are the sons of God or the children of God. This term, son of God, children of God, father, is not used in the Quran and is not used by the Prophet Muhammad, and we do not refer to ourselves or to God in this manner. Now, the reason for that is that historically the use of this terminology has led people to shirk. People have been led to imagining that they or some prophets are equals or co-equals with God by the use of this terminology. Now, I won't go very deeply into this explanation, but it is important to understand that in the pagan world, this term, son of God, the idea that the gods, Zeus, Aphrodite and all the rest of them, and had sons, literally sons. They believe that the gods literally had sexual intercourse with women and demigods were born. Hercules, for example, was a son of Zeus. So they actually believe that the gods literally had literal sons. And in fact, it was a justification of the church to claim that Jesus was God through their belief that he was the Son of God. Because their logic said that my son is human like me. Therefore, God's son must be a God like God. And that is one of the theological arguments they used to try and prove that Jesus was divine. Because if he was the Son of God, he must be divine like God. He must share God's nature, just like my son shares the same nature as me. But of course, in Islam we turn that back on its head. We say, well, when you say someone is the Son of God, what do you actually mean by that? Because my son is a product of an intimate act that took place between me and my wife. So are you saying that God committed an intimate act with a woman in order for a son to be born? And that is why the Quran says, if God had a son, then who is God's wife? Because presumably God would not condemn adultery for us and then practice adultery and fornication himself. So if God